So hello, everybody. Thank you, Richard. So today we're talking about how AI advances are changing the scope of technology in regulatory compliance. So it's quite a broad subject. I'm going to say at the top, we will not be discussing ChatGPT until quite near the end, so we can try and have a debate about other things. I'm not sure about you, but I'm at peak ChatGPT chat. Anyway, moving on, you can also please submit your own questions via the Brella app in the Q&A section. So please do that. We'll do the questions at the end as well. And I'm now going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So Cecile, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cecile Malinaud. So I work at BNP Paribas. All my professional life, I've always focused on leveraging technologies and quant methods to make things more efficient and safer. Recently, I was still in charge of an AI team working on markets activities. And now I am in charge of designing the digital strategy for conduct and controls. So it covers trade surveillance, voice surveillance, e-com, AML, record keeping, and anti-fraud. Plenty of nice topics you all know about.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Cecile. Chinmay?
Chinmay Parikh, I'm Innovation Lead at Financial Conduct Authority. So my team looks after, so we do RegTech, SubTech, emerging technologies to look at, what's on horizon for 2 to 5 years' time. What's our international and domestic strategy from innovation perspective. Prior to this, I was accountable exec for crypto asset regulation. So I rolled out crypto asset regulation in the FCA and in the market in MLR. Many of you may know that. And, but primarily, been working in change, transformation, and regulatory programs, at the FCA. Prior to this, worked at a number of different commercial and consulting organizations, and I've got a background in AI. I did PhD about 20 years ago, so that's how my interests are in AI.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chinmay. Nabeel, you've already been here, but you might as well go again.
Am I perfect? Hello again, everyone. So my name is Nabeel. So as by way of introduction, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Behavox. That means they don't trust me with anything code related or tech related, but everything that's go to market. I'm a recovering lawyer as well, but every once in a while I get sent out to talk about AI. So thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nabeel.
Susannah, Hammond. I'm Senior Regulatory Intelligence Expert at Theta Lake. And the Theta Lake solution enables regulatory compliance with the unified communications platform. So that's the Zoom, the Teams, the Ring Central. We are the bit that gives financial services a lot more comfort in using all of those platforms. Career-wise, I've been a head of compliance probably way more times than is good for me. And previously, I was at Thomson Reuters Regulatory Intelligence for 15 years. Gosh, there we go. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Susannah, and thank you all. All right, brilliant. Let's crack on with the first question. So the first one we've got is around the choice people have. So with an increasing choice of RegTech solutions, how are financial institutions identifying the right technologies to fit their requirements? How do they get it right? Cecile, you want to start?
Yes, so this is really about my job, so thanks a lot.
Sorry.
So yes, we have so many new technologies, so many vendors, and we have to really have the strategic, make the strategic decisions of what will work and for the long term. So banks like BNP Paribas, we are big companies, so we have many drivers. The first, obviously, being we have to cover our risks. So any choices is driven like how we make the bank safer, which is at the top of the agenda of any financial institution today. But we have other drivers as well. So we are really looking for long-term partnerships. So we are looking for technologies internally or externally, by the way, that we can, we are not on the 1 or 2 years horizons. We are always thinking 5 years, 10 years. So you have to be there for the long term. If you are a vendor coming to us, you have to demonstrate that you have this long-term strategy and that you will be a partner for in our mind forever, which is 5-10 years today. The costs are important, but we are not thinking about cost necessarily as the cost vendors charge us. We are really looking at the full picture. So we are not very flexible organizations sometimes. I know if you worked with companies like us, I'm sure you had this experience. So we are big companies and everything is costly, every change is costly. So we are looking at how easy it will be to implement the change, how costly it will be in terms of organizing the teams, having the onboarding the company if it's an external partners, and as well, obviously, paying the license fees, if any. So we have all these drivers. It's never an easy decision. And I've seen some vendor at the networking event today, and they were asking, okay, what's important for you when you choose? And they were asking, are you looking for someone who can cover everything or someone who is best in class in what they do? And this one is easy. You have to be best in class in what you do. So, and we are looking really for game changer, people who are the best at what they do. This is really key.
Okay, Susannah, that's what they want.
Well, of course, Theta Lake is best in class. I mean,
how do you deliver it?
Well, I think one of the ways people choose the solutions is they come from, to sort of paraphrase what Cecile has said, where are your compliance gaps? Where is it you could get hurt? Where is it that actually your regulatory risks might crystallize? We've seen so many fines recently, and I caught the end of Nabeel's lovely presentation, and there's more still coming, let's be completely frank. But I think one of the key things when you're looking at compliance gaps is not only where have you not perhaps been able to capture something, but also when you're using technology, are you able to take full advantage of all of the features and functionalities of that technology, or because you've got compliance concerns, risk management concerns, you switch something off? So to take the example, if you've got Zoom, if you're using Zoom for your video conferencing, for your meetings, have you turned off chat? And if so, what are the unintended consequences of that? I mean, if you've turned off chat in your meetings, where are all your employees chatting? And do you know? Can you surveil that? Can you capture that? So I would go understand that not only it's the compliance gaps where is there a regulatory risk there, but I would also be very careful to look at where perhaps you've switched something off or you have curtailed something and people have just gone somewhere else to carry on talking to each other. And that's not necessarily malicious. That's just, oh, well, I need to talk to you. You know, therefore, we'll go on to whatever app it is, whether it's the WeChat or the WhatsApp or whatever. But you've got a gap there. And that's the sort of thing you're going to need a solution for, because you need that productivity. And let's be frank, you also want to have the return on investment from what you've invested in those UC platforms. Back to Cecile's point, you need the value for money out of these things. So you need the solutions that can enable the compliance so you can get the value for money and have all of those features and functionalities switched on.
Thank you very much. Okay, so fingers crossed we've now chosen the right thing. But we've now got, obviously, increasing regulatory developments around AI itself and how it's regulated. So that as an extra challenge, how can the industry prepare for that? Chinmay, do you want to maybe come in?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's simple, right? At least I would like to say. From UK's perspective, I think, we are, outcome-focused, principle-led regulators. So we are tech neutral. We don't regulate technology. So generally, we say that, we're looking at, what you are delivering from outcome and outcome perspective and how we are protecting consumers, how we're making sure market is working well. So what technology you use is not kind of in our concern as such. Right? Having said that, right, there are a few things, right? So if we look at kind of broad principles, for example, we did AI discussion paper recently, and when you look at what we put out in that, one of the things that we said is the governance, right? And a few years ago, we introduced, SMCR, Senior Manager Certification Regime. And what it says that, as a senior manager, you are responsible for what's happening in your, let's say, shop, right? You cannot say that, the technology says so, right? So I think if we are focusing on outcomes, I think that's kind of to keep in mind. And what you are doing is that in the benefit of consumers, right? So if you keep that into mind, then probably, the evolving regulation that may come, it may help you, right? Rather than you have to start from fresh, you might be able to demonstrate. Of course, there are some other challenges, but we might cover that separately.
Sure. Okay, brilliant. Nabeel, you obviously see a lot of requirements coming from regulators. What's it like from your side, on the surveillance side?
I think it's a little bit amusing because just yesterday, if anyone followed what happened in the States, so Sam Altman goes in front of Congress and says, "I implore you to regulate AI," which is great because I bet if we did a survey of a lot of lawmakers, they wouldn't be able to define AI appropriately. And that's not to poke fun at lawmakers. I think they're wonderful people. But it's quite frankly, it's dangerous when people say they want to regulate a piece of technology that is evolving. And that's why I think, look at SR 11.7, look at the approaches that regulatory bodies have taken. Outcomes analysis is a way of driving effectiveness. And ultimately, regulators have always said, do what's appropriate and measurable, reasonable and justifiable. Those wonderful phrases and words. So we see more of an emphasis and more of a dialogue over the past 18 months with model risk management teams, which when I started in this space 7 years ago, we never saw, because it was random samples and it was lexicon that can be just looked at. So now we see copious amounts of documentation and explainability, but things are evolving. So when if you've picked the right vendor and if you're working and being collaborative with the right regulators, it's an ongoing dialogue with the vendor of choice as well, because it's how your approach is evolving and how are they continuing to be more explainable and robust.
Okay. So we've talked a bit there about, obviously, the regular developments around AI. We're now using AI in our systems ourselves. How can financial institutions ensure that they understand the inherent risk in AI systems? I'm going to look to Cecile first.
Yes, so I think that's interesting because financial institutions, they have internal labs. They have invested a lot in technology. Technology is at the core of our business, and we have understood that pretty early. So we have most financial institutions, we have big lab teams, we have the internal expertise. And at the same time, we are highly regulated. SR 11.7 is what we have to live with, and we are very used to managing our models because, frankly, because we had to. So we have this culture of risk management already. So these two things together, we did put a lot of efforts on the AI technology and how we would really be confident of what we do with this technology very early on. So we have a risk framework, we have plenty of things. I'm sure we are one of the first industry where we have looked so much at everything about how we explain what we get out of these models. You have open source libraries that help you to calculate some sort of GWICs on the parameters of your model. I'm sure we are the main users of that because GWICs, it talks to everyone in markets activities. We understand that very well. We document everything, we stress test everything, we understand the limit of everything. So just to say, I'm pretty confident we are the industry paying the most attention at explaining and understanding our models in AI.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Chinmay, do you want to come in a little bit on those risks and how the regulator thinks about those risks?
Sure. So I think, from our perspective, and I think if I kind of put firm's hat on my kind of head, right, then Probably, I think it's understanding the context in which you're operating and knowing your environment, understanding the risk and control. That's where the kind of nub of the matter is, right? And what I mean by that, I think, if you look at, very few firms have got, no legacy, overhead or debt, right? Technical debt. You operate in the legacy infrastructure, you got legacy systems, and by that, you also have data which is of inconsistent standard and quality and bias and whatnot, right? So, and if you look at AI, they are run at a different pace than the legacy system, right? They deliver different outcomes, and they deal with things differently. So how do you manage that twin speed train, right? How do you make AI systems work alongside your traditional legacy systems? The more risks that arise from AI are no different than what you used to have or you have in your traditional models. I think just the pace at which they come and pace at which the changes happen is very different, and also the time it would take you to understand would be very different. You won't have enough time to understand, right? What's happening in AI models, etc. So I think then leading on from that, I think the risk that you are facing is model risk management that you just earlier mentioned. I think that's the key thing, right? So how you are training your models, how your model can provide that transparency, explainability, how you are addressing data biases that are inbuilt, right? How do you make sure that your models is continuously trained to take into account new scenarios that are emerging, and you're removing the bias, or you're making your systems better, and your senior executives and decision makers understand how decisions are being made, rather than my AI model says so, because from regulatory perspective, it's definitely not going to work, right? And if you look at SMCR, that's where it is. And linking to this one, I think, is skills and capability, right? There's a shortage of, as you know, right? The relevant skill. How do you make sure that you have right talent and right people in there, but at the same time, the senior executives and management, they understand, how you are using AI, how that decision engine is evolving. And I think finally then looking at, there's third parties, there's a lot of reliance on third parties. Everyone, mostly uses third parties either as a vendor, as an outsourcer, etc. So do you understand the risk that poses, the AI models that they might be using or data that might be generating? So I think is kind of summaries, I think, looking at your environment, looking at your risk and control, that will help, in the context of AI. AI is just application of, technology and data, and developing models, executing models at much faster pace than what we were used to in the past.
Sure. Well, you finished on the past, which is interesting, because I think the legacy systems, well, I come from an institution with lots of legacy systems. In fact, just lots of legacy, loads of it. But really, I think that's quite an interesting area to start to think about. So which areas of compliance are most ripe for innovation? What bits of the system currently could be done better? Susannah, do you want to come on that?
I think there's probably a shopping list. We could either do that sort of categorically or alphabetically, but I think there are some, given the lightning speed of technology that is going on at the moment, and given that, back to Chinmay's point, technology neutral in a lot of this, it almost doesn't matter what you are using communications-wise or whatever. Have you got control of it? Have you got line of sight to it? And I think one of the big challenges with the UC platforms, and let's be frank, those were so useful when we had the pandemic. They basically enabled life to go on business-wise, or just life generally to go on. But now, a lot more focus is going on how those actually work in practice. Now, I strongly suspect everybody here has pretty much got voice recording off pat. We're very used to that. We're really quite good at it, and it's been around for ages. I also suspect email is probably pretty well captured. Record keeping is sorted, all of the rest of it. My challenge I would then turn to is, can you capture emojis, GIFs, reactions, deletions? Someone holds up a piece of paper in front of the camera in a meeting saying, this is being recorded, we need to move on to WeChat, say. can you capture all of that? And I think that's where there is a big issue now, because the technology has just moved at light speed, and firms are going, well, okay, we've got to be able to catch up with this. And back to Cecile's point, where's the record keeping on that? And you know, if ESMA has very clearly said, and the FCA has adopted it, all of this needs to be captured under MiFID II. Any kind of MiFID II investment business, you've got to be able to capture it all. And I would suggest you not only need to be able to capture it all, you need to be able to preserve it in its native context. So it's no good saying, oh, well, in this conversation, there was an emoji there. Well, terrific. Was it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or something else? That makes a massive difference to the conversation. And I know that's stating the obvious, but have you captured that emoji? Could you reproduce it? Can you do surveillance on it? And you know, AI is a absolutely many splendid thing, but unless you can do that upfront capture, the AI is working on incomplete data. So your AI will not be able to deliver even the 70% Nabeel was talking about, unless you have been able to capture upfront in its native context all of that data. And yes, of course, you need to capture it for your record-keeping obligations, but if you then want to be able to do the surveillance on what is going to be humongous amounts of data with all of those conversations and communications flowing back and forth, you've got to get that capture right up front. And I wouldn't limit how difficult that is, because those conversations are going to mesh with each other. It's going to bounce from a Zoom meeting to a WeChat to Teams, because Zoom didn't work for somebody, so you moved on to another platform. You've got to be able to follow the conversation as well. So yeah, I think capture is a real challenge, a solvable challenge, but be aware it's a real challenge.
Okay, so if capture is an issue, Nabeel, you were talking a lot about capture in your presentation. How do you do it better? How do you solve that endless problem?
I think so. So I'll answer this in two ways. One is one of the ways to improve capture is to stop asking people to take data from archives. So as a vendor, sometimes whenever we have a conversation with someone, they say, well, we've got an archive. Can you just pull it from the archive? And the thing is, if you want to have effective monitoring of your communications, if you want to use these large language models, you can't just feed us a PST full of emails and say, go figure it out. And in the PST, there's a Teams chat, there's a Zoom transcript, there's what have you. You do need to do, what Susannah said, and you need to take it from native sources. So that's one thing. But I think more importantly, what I'm seeing is one of the most interesting areas that's ripe for disruption in the compliance space is actually the teams that make up compliance workforces. I think over the past 18 months, I've seen the rise of the superficial data analyst within compliance, the Wikipedia data scientist. And then when you ask them a question, which is, well, what about an F1 score, an RUC curve, an AUC curve? Unless you have someone like Cecile in the room, the person on the other side says, well, surely it just finds true positives. So, you need to have a much more upskilled team that is able to actually understand what are the data challenges, right? Everyone loves to talk about data reconciliation. How? What happens if you have a vendor that can actually competently do stitching of Bloomberg chats and move them from persistent chats into a single thread? How do you reconcile that with what you get at source in an SFTP? These are conversations that you need people who are competent. You need them in the room. And right now we're having very superficial conversations. So vendors might tell you there's ways to solve it, and they're going to ask you for, I know my team tries to do it, ask you for a ton of money and professional services to solve it, but it becomes a lot more effective when you have good data management teams, good data governance teams, and compliance IT, as opposed to just IT volunteering their time, is driving a lot of that conversation.
Okay, well, as somebody who works in data governance, that's music to my ears, so that's excellent, well done. But Chinmay, what are we seeing with the firms we regulate? You can't say who's doing it well, but what's being done well?
I think, if you look at what is happening in recent times, I think distributed ledger technology has, evolved significantly, and its application in financial services is, increasing rapidly. And what I've seen in those things is application of AI and technology, which is data and technology, to manage some of the new challenges that are posed by technology like DLT. The problem or issues or the focus that we need to have from regulation perspective are no different from any other financial services asset class, etc. But DLT is a different type of solution. It's not a traditional financial services kind of area. So I think I've seen quite a few products that have come out in that space. There are some here as well as to how they are managing. I think I'll probably extend this to what are the kind of opportunities that are there, right? Say, of course, crypto asset, digital asset, or blockchain, that provides a kind of, it's a ripe area for, RegTechs and FinTechs to go in. But if you look at the changes in the society and the demand that it puts in from ESG perspective, I think, again, that's a very kind of ripe area. We are looking at it, from subtech or supervisory tech perspective. We launch a kind of global sandbox with a number of regulators as part of GFIN. And we're looking at this to, how we can address the problem of greenwashing. So there are areas that are kind of, that they're being focused, but there's a greater focus is required. And if you're looking for other opportunities, then I think, just need to look at, kind of new regulations that are coming in. So new consumer duty, again, it's nothing to do with technology. It's nothing to do with, products as such. But, is a product governance and how we are keeping consumers in mind. And this is, again, in my view, personal view, AI provides an opportunity there as well.
Okay, brilliant. So we've got a smorgasbord of things we can do, things we can look at, and things we can improve. This is the ChatGPT bit. I did warn you it was coming. It's coming now. But I think we do need to talk a little bit more broadly about the state of natural language processing and where that's going. There's loads of hype, but what can it actually do in the compliance space that can help us? Nabeel, do you want to comment on this one?
Sorry, you're on mute. No.
That's just mean.
I think when we think of natural language processing and we think of what large language models can do, one of the values that I've personally seen is the ability to look across multiple languages. So when you have people working from home, when people are more relaxed, I myself, sometimes when I'm speaking, default into native language, yet I use Latin characters to do so. And now you've got, multilingual models that do not care what language you're using. As long as they're fed the right data, they can identify it. I think the second thing that I've seen is I know that record keeping for voice has improved, but the quality of voice itself hasn't improved as much. But you've got, again, the advent of large language models able to overcome some of the low quality transcripts. So again, the move away from expecting higher quality transcripts, but better quality analytics of lower quality transcripts, I'm seeing the rise of that.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Cecile, what are you seeing in BNP Paribas
yes.
being used?
So at BNP Paribas, I guess as everywhere, there was a lot of buzz around ChatGPT. I have been to so many presentations about the topic. It's like it was with blockchain, I would say, a few years ago. So there is a lot of excitement. At the same time, we have made a lot of efforts to look at everything it can do in our business. We have many ideas, so everyone is thinking about it, and we recognize the limitation. I think the question was phrased at first, like, can it understand everything? Obviously, no, ChatGPT doesn't understand anything. It's not about understanding. It's about selecting the right data and repackaging it the right way, like it talks to you. But if you played with it, you know that sometimes it can be very wrong and very assertive in being wrong. So in our business, this is something we really cannot live with. So we are looking at ways to avoid that. Like we are thinking about all the ways where it can just be the first output given to the human being who would then give this output to our clients or to or internally. We are thinking about ways as well to have the corpus of inputs that we know, like at BNP we have a big research team, obviously, and we have so much information that we'd like to be able to provide to our clients or to our employees sometimes in the way they want. But we have to be sure that when we ask the question, what is the BNP analyst view on this, where this currency is going, we have to be sure that the input will be the one we want, that we cannot have an uncertainty that he will use a 2 years old piece of research instead of the last one. So all of that, we have to understand how exactly it works and the right controls we need so that it never happens that we give a wrong answer, and it can be so convincing with wrong answers when you try it. So we have to really pay attention to that. So it's very exciting. I think it will, at some point, change the way we work and we interact with clients. It will make our life easier, but we have still a lot of work to do.
Excellent.
Do you mind if I
jump in on that?
There was actually a news article 2 days ago where content moderation, so for the likes of Twitter and Facebook, so content moderation, in some instances, large language models are almost 97% effective in content moderation as humans. But to Cecile's point, the moment you introduce complex nuance into it, it cannot understand nuance. So that's where you need to have that human in the loop. But to the point of, has it already made dramatic strides in at least areas that we might care about between Theta Lake and Behavox? For sure. But can you just bet the house on it right now? Probably not.
No. Hopefully no one's doing that. So if we move on, so we've got just under 15 minutes left, and we've got quite a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to try and run through those. If you put them through on the platform, that's fine. If someone wants to stick their hand up, I don't know, I'm not sure if there's roving mics. I think there might be. Yes, there is. I can see a roving mic. Thank you. So there's roving mics as well. But I'm going to start with this one. I think it's quite an interesting question, which is there a risk of firms getting excited about cost cuts and efficiency boosts through AI to the point that they significantly reduce their own compliance team sizes? And what risk does that bring? Does someone want to come in on that?
This echoes back, I mean, some of you may have read the report I used to write called Cost of Compliance when I was still at dear old Thomson Reuters. And we always ask the question, do you think advances in technology will mean you would no longer need compliance officers? I mean, we phrase it slightly differently. And it was always, yes, but in 5 years' time. And I think that still holds true because we don't know yet what tomorrow's risks are going to be. We've got a pretty good idea the direction of travel they might be in, but you are always, I would suggest, going to need the human in the loop. You are going to need that human who directs the technology. You are technology neutral, who uses the AI, who uses the natural language processing as tools. And it is the compliance functionality that directs those tools. And I think you will always need that strategic approach to compliance. And for me, that will always be a human. But that human may well have vastly different technological tools and solutions at their fingertips. That doesn't change the fact you need the human to direct those tools.
Chinmay, you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting question and kind of looking at this one, right? So I wouldn't be looking at it from kind of, whether human would be required or it's reducing cost of compliance. I think I would see it as it's improving compliance, and, with the same people, you'd be able to do more. You'd be able to scan much wider than what, you are able to do today, right? As technology has evolved, we become more and more efficient, right? And that hasn't meant that it has reduced the human involvement. I think there are other areas that we will progress and will tackle, right? Well, I think what it would do, in my view, is that it would improve regulatory outcomes, by using technology appropriately and having appropriate intervention, from human perspective, right? Not only in terms of, looking at the outcomes, right, whether they are true positives, false negatives, but also, are your models relevant? That will require different type of skill set. So I think human would still be involved, compliance people and teams would be involved. It's just they might be doing in a different way than what they might be doing today.
I think CFOs are always excited about cost cutting, but I think what we'll see with the growth of technology is actually business efficiency. But what you'll see is actually reallocation of budgets. So creating AI for anyone who's actually creating it or building large language models or running compute is incredibly expensive, and we're all going to do what every vendor does, and there's pass-through costs. Those costs are going to far outweigh what legacy technologies have costed, so that's an increase in cost. And the second thing that's going to happen is, sure, you might be able to optimize hundreds of people clicking buttons, but you will need to have upskilled people actually reviewing it. So banks have made massive investments into higher skilled labor to do just that. So it's a reallocation of spend. I don't think it's a cost cutting exercise. And already, if you look at it, compliance teams already struggle to get budget as it is. So if you're going to cut that even more, then you're actually just threatening your promise of market integrity.
Okay.
You're not only threatening market integrity, you're threatening regulatory sanctions, let's be quite blunt. Yeah.
It can cost you quite a lot. Okay, no, so actually that links kind of into another question we've been asked, which is, what is the appetite to make changes to vendor solutions where there isn't a specific fire, a regulatory issue to solve? So I think the question here really is, how do we think about the target identification of problems? Are we still at the point where we're sort of jumping around trying to fix the last crisis or the last problem, or are we beyond that? And if so, how is that working? That's the question that's coming out. I'm not sure if anyone wants to.
I'll give a really straightforward answer. To me, it and this is a cynical answer, I apologize, but when I, not as a representative of Behavox or someone who's a market participant, but when I looked at the fines that banks paid out for WhatsApp and WeChat, and then I looked at the revenue they made in the same quarter for 3 years worth of wrongdoings, it paints a very interesting story. So to me, I think there's a lot of running around and ambulance chasing in this space. Everyone is talking about WhatsApp and WeChat like we've forgotten about voice, we've forgotten about languages, we've forgotten about stitching trade with comms. So it's the popular thing. And then now it's all about regulation of ChatGPT, but we haven't solved fundamentals. And quite frankly, I think the space is still massively underfunded, and there's a lack of interest in solving these problems.
I'd also say that record keeping, I mean, we've talked about capturing really quite a lot already, but record keeping somehow has always been a poor relation. It's never the sexiest thing. It's never the thing that gets the budget, but it's always the thing that comes into play if you've got a regulatory issue, because your inability or your potential inability to, if you like, prove you have done the right thing in the right way is so valuable once your lovely regulators come knocking on the door. Suddenly record keeping is all important because where's the evidence we did the right thing? And then when the whole thing's sorted out, the emphasis on record keeping, particularly consistently robust record keeping, just floats away again. And that's very much with my head of compliance hat back on, been around that roundabout several times. I think if you can find a vendor who focuses on the fundamental basics, so the record keeping, for instance, back to Cecile's point, you're going to need that forever. Whether it's some glamorous new loophole or whatever, terrific. But you've got to get the fundamentals right first, and you've got to carry on getting those right, or else you're going to be in such regulatory trouble now.
But maybe just to your question about do we invest only when we have a crisis, I think we are past that. We have now already holistic programs on our controls around risk. We have to look at everything, every risk. We have to anticipate. We have very advanced questions on how we make sure that our employees do not adapt too much to the controls we can put in place. Sometimes it's good that they adapt. It means that the culture change, and this is something we want, but we don't want them to adapt to evade any surveillance we put in place. So we already have all these questions. I think you say that budget can be tough. I think this is one of the few places. I worked a lot on market activities before. I've been on the controls part only for a few years, and I can tell you it has never been as easy as there to get a budget. Not saying that it's completely easy. We want to be profitable, obviously, but it's much easier than anywhere else because we really invest in controls, and we invest thinking about the next generation of controls. It's something important.
Thank you. I think we've got a question from the audience, so we're just going to get a roving mic. It's doing its roving thing. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the old classic style of the question, like not sending it via, but like a question is about the AI and adoption of AI, and you mentioned about the explainability. Without going into so much details of the explainability side, the challenge with explainability, and I'm definitely interested to hear a lot of from your perspective, is who's your audience? Like when you when you have like an output from a scenario AI, and like you are talking to a data scientist, yeah, they sit to me, they tell me everything about it. Try to explain to a surveillance analyst who has no background in mathematics or data, is more like an expert in the, for example, the market. Very interested about that side of the explainability. Yeah?
So the audience is, we have a risk AI model management team who they are experts as well, and they review all the AI models. So we have that to make sure someone can review the model and understand that. But still, we explain what we do to non-technical people as well. You have more people like me coming from more the technical part to the more controls part, which helps as well to have the right frameworks. So I think there is a little bit of everything to try to make it right. But yes, I remember the first time I had compliance people in front of me trying to explain my confusion matrix, what it means exactly. Yes, it can be tough conversations, to be honest.
Thanks, Cecile.
Yeah, so I think, if I look at it from a regulator perspective, I think who is your audience? I think decision makers in your organizations, and of course, your supervisors. You made certain decisions, and you taken certain path. Are you able to explain why you did so? You might say that my AI model told me to have pricier insurance for this group of people and not for others. You should be able to explain, right? And if you are not able to explain, I think that makes it even more complex, right? But if you're able to explain, then at least, and you understood that that is correct as well, right? So it's not just about explainability. Do you reason with that explanation, or there are some tweaks and changes required in the model? And we know that data has been issued, right? And if you're training your models on historic data, bias is built in unless you removed it. So if you not remove the bias, your model will do, AI model will do what it was doing in traditional kind of computing way, right? So the outcome is not going to be different. So I think there are, kind of your decision makers, supervisors, your compliance officers, and your staff itself, right? They need to know how decision is arrived at, and is that the right way we come to.
Thanks. We've got one more question from the audience. We're also running short on time, so we're going to make this the last question. So yeah, fire away.
Hi, hello. So artificial intelligence, right, is coming from machine learning, and machine learning is coming from handwritten mathematics. So I would like to ask, from a regulatory perspective, are regulators trying to regulate mathematics?
Good question. Chinmay, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, sure.
I
So
can have a go as well if you want, after you.
a short answer, no, right? As I said, right, we are technology agnostics, and I know mathematics or statistics, that's not technology, but that's just the approach you're taking, right? I think what we are looking at, what we'll be looking at is the outcome, right? And you are building models using mathematics, statistics, etc. So it's not regulating those, right? I think And I would say, so there are very few people who would be able to get their head round, if you start applying machine learning, neural networks, how those synapses have been weighted and decision is coming to right. So short answer is no. I think we are looking at just the outcomes. And, principle-based regulation does not prescribe, what you do, how you do it. It is looking at, what are the outcomes and are you able to justify those things or not.
Okay, I think we need to close it there. So thank you very much to all of our panelists. Hope that was interesting. And I'll pass back to Richard.